mercy upon us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Almighty God, who in thy wisdom and goodness has appointed the office of rulers and parliament for the welfare of society and the just government of men, we beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor us thy servants whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of important trust in these islands. Let thy blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands, and of whose interest thou hast committed in our charge. And this we beg for Jesus Christ's sake. Amen. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.
Amen. Good morning, members. The House is now in session. Excuse me. Members, the minutes of the 2nd of December have been circulated. Are there any amendments required? There are none. The minutes will be confirmed as printed. Messages from the governor? There are none. Announcements by the speaker? I've been notified by the following members that they will be absent today: MP Anthea Simmons-Wade, MP Jamal Simmons, MP Sandy Silva, and MP Levita Fogo will all be absent from today's proceedings. Messengers from the Senate? There are none. Papers and other communications? There are 3 this morning. The first 2 are in the name of the Premier. Minister of Finance, would you like to present your communications?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to lay for the information of this Honorable House the Bermuda Fiscal Responsibility Panel Annual Assessment 2023-2024.
Thank you. Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to lay for the information of this Honorable House the pre-budget report in advance of fiscal year 2023-2024.
Thank you. Minister Hayward.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to lay for the information of the Honorable House the Department of Financial Assistance 2021-2022 Annual Report.
Thank you. That's all the papers and communications for this morning. We'll move on. Petitions. There are none. Statements by ministers and junior ministers. There are 9 such statements this morning. The first is in the name of the Premier. Premier, before I call on you, I'd just like to announce that somewhere during the statements this morning, I'm going to vacate the chair. I have a family funeral that I'm going to attend to, and so I'll be leaving here probably around 10:30ish, if not before. Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to inform this Honorable House of the deserving public officer recognized as Employee of the Year and to acknowledge Public Service Excellence Award special category winners. The awards were presented at the Public Service Excellence Awards year-end celebration hosted earlier this week. Mr. Speaker, honorable members who recall, the Public Service Excellence Awards is a monthly recognition program for public officers. The program aims to encourage outstanding achievement and to recognize, appreciate, and celebrate public officers demonstrating admirable service delivery. Mr. Speaker, the program launched in September 2021, and during the period, approximately 500 public officers have been nominated either individually or as part of a team, and 15 have been recognized with the monthly Public Service Excellence Award. Mr. Speaker, the monthly publication of the fine work being accomplished by public officers helps to balance the dialogue around careers in public service. It showcased the diversity of careers and, importantly, highlights the array of talented, innovative, service-centric, and accountable public officers who contribute with excellence on a daily basis. Mr. Speaker, each year it is expected that all nominees will be recognized at a year-end appreciation event. The inaugural event held Tuesday, December 6th at Pier 6 saw the many public officers nominated during the year come together to be formally acknowledged. It was my distinct pleasure to present special category awards and make the selection from the list of finalists for and present the Employee of the Year Award. Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to attracting, nurturing, and retaining the brightest and best talent Bermuda has to offer. Our Rising Star Award, amongst other things, recognizes a young person, 35 years or less, who demonstrates a keen interest in learning beyond their substantive role, an officer who demonstrates potential to excel in a career in public service. The 2022 Rising Star Award was presented to Cultural Affairs Program Manager Carlita Lodge. Ms. Lodge has led on a number of significant cultural programs and most notably was at the helm of the reintroduction of the Heritage Day Parade following several years of suspension owing to COVID-19 restrictions. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will be aware of the array of services offered and programs developed to enhance the lives of the people of Bermuda. The award for excellence in project delivery requires that the project solve a critical need. The project was innovative and creative, and it required a team of shared resources from across departments and ministries to work together on delivery. The 2022 Award for Excellence in Project Delivery was presented to Training Manager in the Department of Workforce Development, Dr. Patricia Chapman. Dr. Chapman led her team at Workforce Development to quickly design and deliver a number of programs for the benefit of the public, including the Learn to Earn program with participating restaurants, numerous online courses and seminars, retooling and equipping Bermudians to be more effective in their job search, partnerships with private sector organizations and firms, the cleaning industry, landscaping industry, and accounting profession to identify and train Bermudians and more. Notably, Dr. Chapman led on the delivery of the government's unemployment benefit program, which required significant cross-ministry engagement and resource planning. Mr. Speaker, our Excellence in Supporting People Award recognized an officer who readily shares knowledge of policies and processes with others. It requires that the officer works well as a team member and volunteers to assist with other tasks or projects. Our 2022 Excellence in Supporting People Award was presented to Supervisory Foreman in the Department of Parks, Mr. Roger Paris. Mr. Paris manages the Skills Development Program, which is developed jointly by the Department of Parks and the Department of Court Services. Mr. Paris is fully dedicated to his role as a public officer, which serves as a platform for him to be a mentor to Bermuda's youth and impact young lives in a positive manner. Mr. Speaker, our Employee of the Year is selected from the group of Public Service Excellence Award winners for the year. An Employee of the Year uses their skills and expertise to deliver exceptional outcomes for internal or external customers. The officer shows initiative and performs above and beyond his or her role. The officer's work achieves tangible results and makes an impact beyond their immediate team or department. An Employee of the Year is able to deliver in exceptional circumstances and is a self-motivated learner. Mr. Speaker, there were 5 finalists considered for the Employee of the Year Award. These included Transportation Coordinator in the Ministry of Transport, Ms. Stacy Evans. Principal at the Francis Patton Primary School, Mr. Todd Fox. Talent Manager in the Department of Employee and Organizational Development, Ms. Ashwana Thomas. Assistant Building Manager in the Department of Lands and Buildings, Mr. Sheridan Ming. And Supervisory Foreman, Department of Parks, Mr. Roger Paris. All of these public officers were worthy candidates who served with excellence. Mr. Speaker, the 2022 Public Service Excellence Award Employee of the Year is the principal at Francis Patton School, Mr. Todd Fox. Mr. Fox has demonstrated his dedication to raising future leaders of Bermuda with a conscientious outlook on society and all its members. This is evidenced by his application of initiatives to inspire students to think beyond themselves, such as monthly random acts of kindness recognition. He also continues fostering the Leader in Me, a growth model program that emphasizes a culture of student empowerment to unleash each child's full potential through applying the 7 habits of highly effective people. Mr. Fox is a charismatic and optimistic school leader. He is often seen in classrooms, assisting teachers on a daily basis, as well as inside and outside of the building during recess, lunch breaks, and mornings upon arrival, interacting with students at every opportunity to ensure they are happy and safe. Mr. Fox has worked tirelessly alongside teachers and parents and is a co-leader for school transformation for Francis Patton Primary School, targeted to become one of the first parish primary schools. Mr. Speaker, I am delighted by the positive impact of the Public Service Excellence Awards program is having on the service. The government relies on consistent, professional, knowledgeable public officers to deliver for the people of Bermuda. Too often, public officers are at the receiving end of political and public ridicule, which is a great disservice to their devotion and tireless work. And that is why it is so great to have highlighted public service excellence over the last 15 months, showcasing our many dedicated officers and, by extension, underlining the rich, rewarding, and diverse career opportunities within the public service. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. The second statement is also in your name. Would you like to continue that now?
Hopefully I can make it through, Mr. Speaker.
Have a sip of water there. You'll be fine.
Mr. Speaker, I am grateful for your indulgence to present this lengthy statement to this honorable House this morning. It is an honor to rise today on behalf of the government in our last sitting of 2022 to provide an economic and fiscal update to this honorable House and to the people of Bermuda. This statement will cover the latest report from the Fiscal Responsibility Panel, the government's mid-year financial performance, and the government's pre-budget report tabled moments ago. Mr. Speaker, earlier today I laid for the information of this honorable House the 2022 Bermuda Fiscal Responsibility Panel report, which I'll refer to as the report, which has been published on the Ministry of Finance section of the Bermuda Government Portal. The report represents the 8th annual report of the Fiscal Responsibility Panel, which was established in 2015 as an international independent committee to review, monitor, assess, and publicly report on the progress of the Bermuda government. The panel is comprised of a team of international experts chaired by Jonathan Portes, a former government chief economist and UK Treasury official, and now a professor in economics and tax policy at King's College in London. The other members of the panel are Marion Bell, a former external member of the Market Policy Committee at the Bank of England, who also previously advised on fiscal matters to the government of New Jersey, and Victoria Perrin, a U.S. tax lawyer who recently retired from the International Monetary Fund, having spent many years providing technical advice to countries on tax policy and revenue administration. Mr. Speaker, the report contains a comprehensive analysis of Bermuda's fiscal and economic position, its strategy, and related actions. The panel provided their assessments, highlighted critical risks facing Bermuda, and provided recommendations for several key areas impacting Bermuda's fiscal and economic outlook. These include fiscal and tax strategy, expenditure policy, economic and fiscal developments, the international tax landscape, energy and climate change, the economic recovery plan, immigration, pensions, and health. Mr. Speaker, the panel endorsed key aspects of the government's fiscal and economic strategy, including the government's commitment to remain within its fiscal guardrails for the ratios of gross debt and net to GDP. The report commended the adoption of a target for a budget surplus of $50 million in 2026-2027, in line with their previous recommendation. However, as I'll cover later in my statement, identified challenges in reaching that goal. The panel also positively endorsed work being done with regard to the economic recovery plan, substantive tax reform, immigration reform, and climate change. The report also includes recommendations for consideration by the government. These include the following 2 recommendations concerning fiscal and tax strategy. Mr. Speaker, with regard to fiscal strategy, the report reiterates its recommendation that the government should plan for an annual budget surplus of at least $50 million for the 2026-27 fiscal year and subsequent years. This recommendation as the absolute minimum needed to make appreciable inroads into Bermuda's large external debt burden. The panel reiterates that further structural increase in revenues from taxation are required to ensure that the government achieves this target. Mr. Speaker, with regard to tax reform, the report stated, and I quote, "Since its inception, the panel has recommended fundamental reforms aimed at broadening the tax base, including increasing the progressivity of the tax system and increasing revenues, including individual capital income. The government intends to consult on a number of these issues in the pre-budget report, including revisiting some of the earlier recommendations from the Tax Reform Commission. The panel recommends the government commits in the next budget to legislating and implementing a set of reforms along the lines set out above." End quote. Mr. Speaker, the panel concluded its report by saying, and I quote, "The government is addressing many of the most serious problems facing the country, including issues raised in our previous report. The overall fiscal strategy set out in the 2022 budget is more coherent and credible than in prior budgets, but further action is required to deliver it. The fallout from the pandemic is largely behind now, though new global problems, inflation, fuel prices, and worsening climate change now face the country. The government has responded with an ambitious and challenging agenda: the Economic Recovery Plan, the Bermuda Health Plan, the Climate Task Force, an agenda to reform the pension system, and the recent Ministry of Economy and Labor report on demographic pressures. What is now required is implementation and delivery." End quote. Mr. Speaker, the Fiscal Responsibility Panel plays an important role in fiscal policy making in Bermuda. It represents the only independent assessment of the government's fiscal strategy and plans and makes recommendations to ensure the government of Bermuda is progressing towards meeting its fiscal targets. The independent panel, which met with members of the government, opposition, trade unions, international business, and local business, delivered a broad endorsement of this government's fiscal and economic strategy. I take note of their call for delivery and implementation of the promised reforms, and this government will continue to tackle the difficult issues in a thoughtful fashion to ensure success for Bermuda's future. Mr. Speaker, I reiterate my appreciation to the members of the Fiscal Responsibility Panel for their detailed and comprehensive review of the government of Bermuda's financial position. And I urge all honorable members to take notes of their report and their recommendations as we debate issues later today and during next year's budget session. Mr. Speaker, I will now share with this honorable House the government's mid-year fiscal performance. Following the government's mid-year assessment, total revenue is revised upwards to $1.1 billion, approximately $30 million above initial estimates. This increase is primarily due to the continued economic recovery, with better than expected increases in tourism-related revenues, payroll tax, and stamp duty. This increase in revenue has more than offset the estimated $17.8 million loss in revenue from the aircraft register as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war. Mr. Speaker, total current account expenditures are now projected to be $956.8 million, $11.7 million above the 2022-2023 original estimate of $945.1 million. The projected increase is primarily driven by the government's economic relief package and other additional spending items which were announced earlier this year. As a result of the previous year's budget performance being better than expected, interest and guarantee management costs are projected to be $138.3 million, $10.5 million more than initially budgeted, largely as a result of one-time costs associated with the recent government debt refinancing. It is worth noting, with the latest transactions, the government has fully refinanced its near-term external debt with more than 4 years until the next bond maturity in January 2027. This means that the government is largely protected from rising interest rates in the medium term, as there is not expected to be a need to borrow additional funds to finance government's ongoing operations. Mr. Speaker, capital account expenditures projected to be $85 million, $12 million more than the $73 million originally budgeted. The projected increase is a result of the approved $7 million to fund critical refurbishments to Tynes Bay to ensure our local waste disposal facility is able to function, and a further $4.1 million to assist the Bermuda Housing Corporation in providing additional affordable housing for the people of Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, the revised budget deficit for 2022-2023 is now projected to be $72 million, or $2 million, or 2.9% more than the original estimate of $70 million. This revised projection is expected to be achieved despite the significant economic relief package to assist persons dealing with the impact of rising global inflation, the elimination of duty for essential goods, the freezing of fuel prices at the pump to counter high energy costs resulting from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the additional investments in affordable housing and infrastructure, and the aforementioned one-time expenses due to the successful debt refinancing. When combining the revised deficit for this fiscal year and the expected deficit from the last fiscal year, the government's net debt is in a much better position than forecasted during February's budget presentation. Mr. Speaker, the March 31st, 2022 net debt level was $66 million lower than previously forecast in February's budget statement. In addition, as at March 31st, 2023, net debt is now forecasted to be $115 million lower than originally estimated in the budget statement projections. Yes, Mr. Speaker, that was not a misstatement, and I'll repeat it for honorable members opposite. The Bermuda government's net debt is now forecast to be $150 million lower than it was projected just 10 months ago. Mr. Speaker, time and time again, this government has demonstrated that it is a good steward of the public purse. Though the opposition may focus on a few missteps, I remind the public that no government gets it 100% right 100% of the time. Mr. Speaker, even Lionel Messi can miss a penalty every now and then. But I return to the weighty matters of finance. Time and time again, this government has demonstrated that we can be trusted to be good stewards of the public purse. We have delivered relief to Bermudians who are challenged with the highest global inflation seen in 40 years. We have made investments in affordable housing and critical infrastructure. We have successfully refinanced our debt despite challenging market conditions, and we are meeting our budget targets. Our mid-year performance sets a strong foundation as we approach next year's budget. Mr. Speaker, when we return to this honorable House next year, it will be for our budget session. One of the key steps in the budget process is the publishing of a pre-budget report. Earlier today, I tabled the 2022 pre-budget report on behalf of the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Speaker, as honorable members will be aware, a pre-budget report outlines the priorities for the next budget in a medium-term framework covering external developments and internal strategies. The government should be accountable for developing strategies to cope with both domestic and international turbulence, and the strategies contemplated should be transparent and open to feedback. Mr. Speaker, in the pre-budget report, we have laid out the government's economic and fiscal policy challenges and provided fiscal policy options for public consultation while soliciting feedback from those affected by any policy changes under consideration. Like most states and territories, Bermuda's economy is vulnerable to external events, underlining the need for fiscal and financial prudence. This vulnerability is compounded by Bermuda's continuing budget deficits and high level of government net debt, standing at $3.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, Accordingly, this government must take appropriate action to address the problems the island faces. It is also important that stakeholders and citizens understand these challenges and are aware of the factors influencing the government's fiscal policy decisions, and utilize the opportunity to give their views. This will facilitate the achievement for the best outcome for Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, this government has already committed to the development and implementation of robust and prudent fiscal and economic strategy based on the fundamental principles of sound fiscal management. These principles include prudent management of financial risks, fiscal policies that enhance the government's fiscal position and are consistent with a reasonable degree of stability and predictability, policy decisions which are constructive, maintain the integrity of the tax system, and have a positive impact on future generations. Mr. Speaker, actions taken in this regard have already had a positive impact on Bermuda's economic and fiscal position, as previously highlighted. Our program has been positively assessed by key credit ratings agencies, with Bermuda's debt being given solid credit ratings and its economic outlook being determined to be stable. The Fiscal Responsibility Panel has also commented favorably on many of the critical initiatives that the government is undertaking to address identified challenges and prepare for the future. The government remains committed to continuing strategic implementation of a well-considered and sound fiscal and economic plan. Mr. Speaker, the key factors which therefore must be considered in the framing and composition of the 2023-2024 budget are as follows. The government's 2022 general election campaign platform and the 2022 throne speech to ensure that the commitments made are appropriately met. Relevant economic considerations, whether globally in relation to our major trading partners or the economic realities that exist within the Bermuda context. Taxation sensitivities. Recognizing that international business is a key contributor to tax revenue, consideration has to be given to the potential competitive impact of decisions being made on this sector. The need for continued fiscal discipline to further reduce deficits on the path towards a balanced budget in fiscal year 2024, 2025, and ultimate reduction in debt levels. The requirements for continued investment and support for the initiatives within Bermuda's economic recovery plan. Continued effective use of zero-based budgeting and the use of the public value assessment outputs to enhance efficiency and cost-effective utilization of resources. The appropriate evaluation of the highlighted risk and implementation of the recommendations from the 2022 report of the Fiscal Responsibility Panel, whose role and work have already been addressed in this statement. In this regard, consideration will also be given to the recommendations made by the 2018 Tax Reform Commission. And finally, Mr. Speaker, feedback from the pre-budget report consultation. Mr. Speaker, before providing a brief outline of key proposals for tax reform contained in the pre-budget report, I think it would be appropriate to highlight certain key economic considerations which are relevant in the Bermuda context. In particular, I would note that global growth is projected to remain unchanged at 3.2% in 2022 and to decline to 2.7% in 2023. This is the weakest growth profile since 2001, with the exception of the global financial crisis and the recent COVID-19 pandemic. The main factors affecting the economy include Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the highest global inflation in 40 years, the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the economic slowdown in China. The U.S. economy has been affected less than most countries by the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but is being particularly impacted by surging levels of inflation and tightening fiscal and monetary conditions, which are expected to continue to slow spending across the economy. Real GDP in the United States is anticipated to grow by 1.8% in 2022, 0.5% in 2023, and 1% in 2024. Notwithstanding the positive steps being taken to stimulate growth in the Bermuda economy, as the United States is Bermuda's largest trading partner and the source of most visitors to the island, the United States' economic performance will impact the pace of Bermuda's economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, having given considerations to all the factors noted above, specific key proposals are presented for consideration and feedback in the pre-budget report. Mr. Speaker, these include changes to the payroll tax framework in relation to both employer and employee tax rates. The proposals for changes to employee taxes include changes to rates to reduce payroll taxes for lower and middle income workers. It is proposed to exempt the first $48,000 of labor income for all workers from payroll tax. This proposed change will remove 30% of the workforce from being liable for paying payroll tax while providing relief to those workers who are most affected by reduced purchasing power due to high global inflation. To compensate for lost revenue, the next 3 tax bands proposed to be adjusted upwards. The result of these proposed rates will see all persons earning under $105,000 annually paying less in payroll taxes compared to the prior year. Mr. Speaker, the pre-budget report also proposed a reduction of employer payroll tax for small and medium-sized businesses with payrolls under $1 million, reductions for hotels, restaurants, and retail stores. Further, the pre-budget report proposes the elimination of employer payroll tax for farmers, fishermen, educational, sport and science institutions, and small businesses with an annual payroll of less than $200,000. Mr. Speaker, additionally, in a sensitive and considered way, proposals have been made for limited increases in taxation, which can have a meaningful positive impact on revenues without compromising Bermuda's competitive position or materially reducing spending and investment. It has been highlighted in the report that government does not intend to continue with the extension of pandemic-related payroll tax concessions, which were put in place to assist business during the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, we've also appropriately taken into account the recommendations of the 2018 Tax Reform Commission, with new withholding taxes being proposed on managed services and dividends for local companies. In addition, amendments to the framework for company fees are included for consideration. The report also includes a number of proposals that have been suggested by key business and union stakeholders in the Bermuda community. Mr. Speaker, the pre-budget report is an important document that promotes transparency in the budget process, reinforces accountability, and allows for effective collaboration on matters that will have a significant impact on individuals and businesses in the community. It is hoped that feedback will be provided to strengthen and undergird the robust approach this government takes to economic, fiscal, and financial management. Mr. Speaker, as we have stated on many occasions, this government is committed to taking care of its people while ensuring its fiscal and economic policies contribute to sustained growth and stability. Our track record has been positively assessed, and we remain committed to a path that will ensure a bright future for generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, the Honorable Premier. The next ministerial statements on the Bermuda Police Service recruitment by the Honorable Michael Weeks. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. Good morning to you, colleagues, and those in the listening public. Mr. Speaker, the shadow of community violence is heavy over the island today as another family mourns the loss of young life. The sound of gunshots shattered the peace of a Paget neighborhood in this season of goodwill. And in the wake of this terrible incident of violence, we must again seek to comfort a family who today have more questions than answers. The support we are providing from the Ministry of National Security will be strengthened by this House and the community keeping this family as the focus of our compassion at this incredibly difficult time. Mr. Speaker, honorable members and the public will recall that in a statement to this honorable House on July 15th, the Premier and Minister of Finance advised that Cabinet will shortly thereafter, and I quote, be invited to approve further measures which will be directed to meeting the staffing shortages in key areas like the Bermuda Police Service, end quote. Mr. Speaker, that statement was made in support of the economic relief package provided to assist Bermudians in this period of economic challenges and included duty relief, additional funding for financial assistance, and school support for parents. Mr. Speaker, concurrent with this economic relief, the government has determined that fiscal prudence, community safety, and staff well-being will be enhanced by providing funding to swell the depleted ranks of specific uniformed services, including the Bermuda Police Service. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to advise this honorable House and the public that, as indicated by the Premier and Minister of Finance in July, Cabinet has approved almost $2 million in additional funding to the Bermuda Police Service. $499,000 will be allocated immediately in this fiscal year, and a further $1.49 million will follow in the next fiscal year. This additional funding will allow the police to recruit 20 additional officers. Mr. Speaker, this additional funding complements an existing operational budget allocation approved by this honorable House of $62,158,000, an increase from financial year 2022, and a capital allocation of $300,000 for vehicles, and a further $1,037,000 for a new island-wide CCTV system. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will be aware of the concerns often expressed by our constituents who desire police visibility in residential areas, providing overt support to communities. I can confirm that through this additional funding, the police will provide an additional 5 officers dedicated to the parish office function. These locally recruited officers will be embedded in and work with the community. Community officers provide a deterrent to further crime, improve public safety, and further enhance public confidence. Mr. Speaker, the balance of 15 officers will enable the service to increase the number of serious crime investigators as well as the number of authorized firearm officers. These are specialist areas of the service in which highly trained officers are developed over time. Commit crimes to justice. Since 2006, Mr. Speaker, there have been 92 murders with 31 open and under investigation, meaning that no one has yet been charged. Additionally, there have been 171 attempted murders between January 2009 and June 2022, with 127 open and under investigation. The impact of these unsolved serious crimes is that there are as many as 157 criminals who have used firearms to either kill or attempt to kill another person and have not yet faced justice. Bringing those persons to justice will have a dramatic positive impact on the community's safety. As the public see more and more criminals brought to justice, their confidence in the police will increase, and that will, in turn, lead to more crimes being solved as they become more emboldened to assist the police. Mr. Speaker, whilst the Bermuda Police Service has aligned all available resources to frontline operational policing posts, an increase in the numbers of police officers is required to meet the extraordinary demand. Currently, the Serious Crimes Unit has 3 sergeants and 7 constables. This is grossly insufficient to meet the demand and means that active murder investigations quickly transition to cold cases as new murders occur and need to be resourced. Further, attempted murder cases are deprioritized to maintain resources in cases where a death has occurred. Mr. Speaker, this recruitment will require the Bermuda Police Service to advertise both locally and overseas. Considering the immediate qualifications and experience required for some of the posts, overseas officers will be among those recruited. I have emphasized to the Commissioner, and I am confident in his full support of the government's position, that we must cultivate and train local officers concurrent with the engagement of any overseas talent. The sustainability of the service depends on an unwavering commitment to training those Bermudian police officers who are prepared to join these specialist areas. It is also important to note, Mr. Speaker, the provision of this additional funding comes with strict accountability. The people of Bermuda are investing in these services, and this recruitment must be managed such that it has direct and positive impact on their safety and security. The Ministry of National Security will hold the Bermuda Police Service to account for the expenditure of these additional funds in keeping with our mandate contained in the 2020 general election platform. And I quote, "To bring lasting calm to Bermuda's communities," end quote. Mr. Speaker, this recruitment effort will provide a measure of additional safety in the community and serve to reduce the overtime commitment of officers who have been in the front line of law enforcement, and in some cases, for several years. Mr. Speaker, various platforms have featured recent discussions about the challenges of recruitment in the uniformed services, and in particular, the Bermuda Police Service, the Department of Corrections, the Bermuda Fire and Rescue Service, the Royal Bermuda Regiment, and the Department of Customs. It is, perhaps, a unique feature of Bermudian life that despite the current economic climate, the service has struggled to attract suitable Bermudians. What is clear with the women and men of the services. Their level of professionalism and with the women and men of the services. Their level of professionalism and love of their job has been inspiring, and it gives me comfort to know that they are there and providing excellent public service. Mr. Speaker, law enforcement has a role to play in the fight against community violence, but the ownership of the problems does not There must be honesty in our actions and words, so that there is no safe space for the commission of crime and no assurance to criminals that their actions will go unpunished. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Weeks. The next ministerial statements, the intellectual property updated legislative framework by Minister Campbell. Mr. Campbell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to provide this honorable House with an update on the progress we are making towards updating the intellectual property legislation for Bermuda. Members of this honorable House will be aware that modernization of the legislative framework governing intellectual property rights was featured in the 2022 throne speech. Mr. Speaker, this government has embarked on the enormous undertaking to update the country's legislation governing trademarks, patents, registered designs, and copyrights to be more fully aligned with global standards and best practices. This initiative will be achieved through the collaborative efforts of the Ministry for Tourism and the Cabinet Office, Ministry of Home Affairs, more specifically, the Department of Registry General and the Ministry of Economy and Labor through the Economic Development Department. Mr. Speaker, industry practitioners have for years petitioned for an updated IP legislative framework, particularly following the advent of fintech legislation and economic substance requirements in Bermuda. In response to more recent requests, an intellectual property task force was impaneled by this government, and a report of recommended actions was produced, which outlined the need to update the suite of intellectual property legislation. Mr. Speaker, consistent with the recommendations of the task force, overhauls of both the Trademarks Act 1974 and the Patents and Designs Act 1930 are currently in progress. Updates to the Copyrights and Design Act 2004 will also be completed. The updated suite of laws and regulations will generally be modeled after the United Kingdom's legislation to ensure that the framework is appropriately positioned to meet international standards. In connection with this initiative, the Bermuda government intends to submit to the United Kingdom government formal requests for extension of several treaties governing the protection of intellectual property rights. The project team is coordinating with the UK Intellectual Property Office on this initiative and will be submitting copies of the draft legislation to the UK IPO for review and comment as appropriate. Mr. Speaker, modernization of the trademarks legislation is entering the final stages of the drafting process. It is anticipated that a new principal act and regulation will, in due course, be tabled, will be tabled before this honorable House to replace the existing legislation governing trademarks in Bermuda. The draft legislation has been reviewed by the necessary government departments and will soon be reviewed by industry practitioners prior to a final consultative review by the UK IPO. Mr. Speaker, the proposed new trademarks legislation will update a regime that was originally enacted nearly 50 years ago to one that reflects an updated approach to drafting, modern processes, and industry best practices. The legislation will transition Bermuda's trademark registration and renewal periods to 10-year terms, which is consistent with standard global practice. Provide more clarity and legal certainty as to the rights and obligations of persons with an interest in registered trademarks, and position Bermuda to be eligible for participation in international treaties and to become a jurisdiction through which international registrations can be effected. Likewise, Mr. Speaker, using the current UK legislation as a model, for Bermuda's updated framework will enable more effective use of UK case law and practical guidance materials to assist in the administration of the trademarks regime. Mr. Speaker, an overhaul of the legislation governing patents and registered designs is also long overdue, since the current legislation was enacted almost a century ago. While that legislation has been updated at various points throughout the years, no substantive amendments have been made to the primary act for nearly 50 years. Working on modernizing the patent legislation has already begun, and that project will follow a similar course as that taken for the trademarks legislation. However, Mr. Speaker, consistent with the current approach in the UK and many other jurisdictions, it is anticipated that the new framework governing patents and registered designs will be separated into two primary acts instead of the current consolidated approach. This will enable a more nuanced approach for governing rights associated with patents and registered designs, and will provide a better foundation for alignment with global best practices and international treaty requirements. Finally, Mr. Speaker, updates will be made to the copyright legislation to enable voluntary registration of copyright ownership. Although the Copyrights and Design Act 2004 was enacted more recently than other IP legislation, updates are needed to enhance the regime to account for modernized practices. While copyright protection arises without the need for registration, allowing persons to voluntarily register their copyright ownership will create a public record of the copyright claim, thereby putting others on notice of it. In jurisdictions such as the United States, copyright registration is a prerequisite to filing a claim of copyright infringement. Mr. Speaker, the additional transparency resulting from public registration of copyright ownership will not only facilitate greater protection against infringement, but it can also facilitate commercial transactions by making it easier for third parties who wish to license a work to reach the appropriate person. Likewise, the government will benefit from additional revenues generated by voluntary registration and ancillary services. Mr. Speaker, at the completion of these legislative updates, Bermuda will be well placed to attract more companies to register their intellectual property rights here. Increased registrations from global market participants, increased government revenues, updated and more efficient administrative practices and processes, and access to well-established case law in the United Kingdom are all benefits that are anticipated to result from this modernization initiative. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda must keep pace with jurisdictional competitors, global market demands, and industry best practices. As we are all well aware, innovation and the protection of intellectual property are vital to the growth and sustainability of any modern society. Updating the legislation will significantly enhance our intellectual property framework, thereby enabling it to serve as an attractive and useful foundation for the protection of intellectual property. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Campbell. The next ministerial statement is about the Human Rights Day 2022 by the Honorable Minister, the Honorable Tanae Ferber.
Good morning, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this morning I rise to remind members of this honorable House that tomorrow, December 10th, will be celebrated globally as Human Rights Day 2022. As Minister responsible for human rights in Bermuda, it is a privilege to share with my honorable colleagues the activities that have been undertaken and those that will be implemented in support of recognizing this important day. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as a historical backdrop, in 1948, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in a response to the barbarous acts which outraged the conscience of mankind during the Second World War. The adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights recognized human rights to be the foundation for freedom, justice, and peace, and sets out a broad range of fundamental human rights and freedoms that belong to all of us. Such freedoms include, but are not limited to, the right to freedom of expression, the right to education, the rights to life, liberty, and privacy, and the rights to social security. Mr. Deputy Speaker, although the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is not a binding document, it has been the inspiration for more than 60 human rights instruments, including Bermuda's Human Rights Act of 1981, which together constitute an international standard on human rights. The Human Rights Act of 1981 received assent on the 7th of July, 1981, and was brought into operation on the 21st day of May, 1982. Over the years, the Human Rights Act has been amended to enhance our human rights and provide further protections to our residents comprising women and girls, children, homeless individuals, and vulnerable groups such as persons with disabilities. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Human Rights Day 2022 is a day to celebrate the achievements of those who have fought for and protected human rights. Human Rights Day inspires others to speak up and take action to end discrimination in all forms. It is also a day of reflection on the future, so a plan moving forward can be developed of what needs to be done to make society fair for everyone. This year, the theme for Human Rights Day is dignity, freedom, and justice for all. Although this year marks the launch of a year-long campaign to promote and recognize the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which will be celebrated in 2023. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Human Rights Commission, as the national human rights institution for Bermuda, plays a critical role in promoting and monitoring the effective implementation of international human rights standards at the national level. The Commission also monitors the government's commitment to human rights and consults the government in this regard. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I take this opportunity to inform my honorable colleagues and the general public about some of the activities that the Human Rights Commission has been involved in during this year, which include on March 7, 2022, the Commission gained membership to the Commonwealth Forum of National Human Rights Institution. This Commonwealth Forum is a member-led network of human rights institutions, ombudsmen, and the public defenders. Members protect, promote, and advance human rights in their respective countries from within Americas and Europe to Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. The community of the Commonwealth Forum of National Human Rights Institution promotes shared expertise and collaboration to ensure a Commonwealth in which the rights of all citizens are respected, protected, and enjoyed. In June of 2022, the Human Rights Commission engaged with the United Nations Group, UN Women, and the following consultation with their organization. They prepared a report for the government's consideration about the United Nations proposed partnership to support the UN Sustainable Development Goals Initiative and assessment of innovative financing for gender equality. Lastly, during this year, the Selection and Appointment Committee of the Human Rights Commission successfully appointed a panel of members to the Human Rights Tribunal to adjudicate human rights complaints. The tribunal has met and are currently in the process of assigning members to panels. I extend congratulations to the Human Rights Commission on its achievements of becoming a member of the Commonwealth Forum of National Human Rights Institutions. Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the spirit of Human Rights Day 2022, the Commission will celebrate Human Rights Day with the Bermuda Society of Arts and Work Academy Student Club, the Human Rights Project. This commemorative art exhibit invited submissions in support of Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. The opening ceremony is today. However, I encourage my honorable colleagues and the general public to take some time and visit the exhibition, which will remain open for viewing until Tuesday, January 10th, 2023, in the Bermuda Society of Arts in the City Hall Arts Center. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in support of the United Nations year-long campaign, the Human Rights Commission will be promoting Human Rights Day 2022 through various mediums such as radio and social media to highlight within our community this year's theme, dignity, freedom, and justice for all. Everyone can contribute to the promotional campaign, whether corporate or private business, community partners, residents, or third sector organizations. We can all work together collectively or individually. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in closing, Human Rights Day 2022 and the year-long campaign can be celebrated in many ways, some of which will include viewing online videos or reading books about human rights to promote self-awareness about human rights and human right violations, hosting a children's fun and educational activity day with read-along sessions that focuses on children's books about human rights issues. This activity would open the minds of our young learners. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this government remains committed to advancing the promotion and protection of human rights and the fundamental freedoms in Bermuda by ensuring as a country that our laws are aligned with international human rights obligations. On behalf of the government of Bermuda, I wish all residents a happy Human Rights Day tomorrow, December 10th, 2022. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Ferbert. The next statement is the update on the economic recovery plan by Minister Hayward. Minister Hayward, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, the Economic Recovery Plan combines fiscal responsibility with a clear path to growth, employment, and greater economic development. The ERP comprises 31 priority initiatives focused on 7 main themes. It was developed in 2020 in response to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Phase 3 implementation of the ERP commenced in March 2021. A dedicated project management office was established in June 2022 to ensure successful implementation of all the initiatives under the ERP, working to monitor, track, report, and lend assistance where required. Mr. Speaker, international benchmarks suggest that successful implementation of the ERP priority initiatives should deliver 1.3 to 1.5% per annum above baseline economic growth from 2023, leading to an improvement in Bermuda's fiscal position. In 2020, Bermuda's economy was predicted to contract by 8.5%. However, the economic contraction was limited to 6.9%. In 2021, Bermuda's economic growth exceeded the predicted 3.5%, and real economic recovery was measured at 5.4%. Bermuda's economy has continued to expand in 2022, and the Ministry of Finance is predicting annual growth between 2.5 and 4.5% for 2022, leading to full pre-pandemic economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, the ERP policy initiatives are advancing well, with 80% of the 31 initiatives on track, with some of the initiatives having already demonstrated positive results. The public can view the ERP updates at www.gov.bm/economic recovery, where they are listed under the 7 main themes. Mr. Speaker, I will now highlight the progress made on several initiatives under the main themes. Under Theme 1, Economic Diversification, the launch of Bermuda's casino industry is advancing, with the Bermuda Gaming Commission having recently granted license to Hotel Co. Bermuda Holdings Limited, operating at St. Regis Bermuda Resort. The Department of Workforce Development is working with stakeholders to establish training programs and develop opportunities for Bermudans in the casino industry. Additionally, the legislative framework to establish Bermuda's subsea communication sector is complete. The regulatory authority has posted the application and the requirements on its website, and the Business Development Agency is promoting the availability of submarine communication cable licenses. Mr. Speaker, under Theme 2, Financial Markets, the government recently announced a partial guarantee mortgage program with the Bermuda Commercial Bank to assist with home ownership for over 250 Bermudians. Under the program, reduced interest rates start at 5%, and the standard down payment is halved from 20% to 10%. Also under Financial Markets, the BEDC COVID-19 support program has successfully deployed $6.1 million in loans, grants, and guarantees to small and medium-sized businesses that demonstrated strong business plans and long-term viability in the post-pandemic economy. Mr. Speaker, under Theme 3, Infrastructure Investment, significant progress has been made with trenching work for potable water and wastewater lines in St. George's and Southside. 22 million has been approved for refurbishment works at the Times Bay Waste to Energy facility to ensure continued safe and reliable waste management. The shoreside fishing processing facility is in advanced stages of planning and consultation. The Bermuda Housing Corporation's residential building program is adding 77 units to the stock of affordable housing with 12 projects underway. And 4.5 million has been invested in the construction of electric bus charging facilities at Dockyard St. George's and Fort Langton bus depots in support of the fleet electrification program. Mr. Speaker, under Theme 4, expanding the residential population, the Economic Investment Certificate has exceeded expectations. 27 applications have been approved, representing 71 individuals, and a total of $369 million invested. Extension of the temporary one-year residential certificate has seen 1,139 applications approved, with 163 extensions granted. 170 applications have been received for permanent resident certificates under the January 2022 amendment to Section 31 of the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Act. Additionally, the Repatriation and Mixed Status Families Amendment to the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Act 1956 has resulted in 188 applications for permanent residency and Bermuda status. Mr. Speaker, under Theme 5, Labor Market and Social Development Measures, the Ministry of Economy and Labor has published a position paper entitled Establishing a Minimum Wage in Bermuda. The paper outlines what a minimum wage is, why it is necessary for Bermuda, and the proposed minimum wage rate of $16.40 to come into force on the 1st of June 2023. Both the National Reemployment Job Strategy and Youth Employment Strategy are currently being implemented. A hospitality recruitment drive is planned for Wednesday, 14th of December 2022 from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Hamilton Princess. Meanwhile, the third cohort of the graduate training program commenced in November. This is a 10-week paid internship opportunity for 15 recent college and university graduates. Mr. Speaker, under the theme Healthcare, under Theme 6 Healthcare, to reduce medicine costs, the Pharmacy and Healthcare Committee is scheduled to conduct the initial phase of drug price reduction regulations in January 2023. And universal health coverage is advancing with 5 priority projects. National Digital Health Strategy, agree our starting points, integrated care pathways, develop PAN system governance, and merge government insurance funds. Mr. Speaker, under Theme 7, Regulatory Framework, the Energy Regulatory Sandbox has been established under the Electricity Amendment Act 2022 and has already begun to garner interest. Additionally, the draft Blue Prosperity Plan has been published with consultation ongoing. Mr. Speaker, I have briefly highlighted some of the progress and success achieved to date under the Economic Recovery Plan, as this government works to ensure that Bermuda not only recovers from the pandemic, but continues to drive with fiscal responsibility, economic growth, employment, and greater economic equity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. You have another statement on the Financial Assistance Annual Report.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I rise to lay the 2021-2022 annual report of the Department of Financial Assistance as prescribed by the Financial Assistance Act 2001. Mr. Speaker, the annual report highlights some significant results achieved during this reporting period, which include reduction in recoverable debt, increased number of clients as a result of COVID-19, particularly in able-bodied category, reduction in the number of child daycare recipients as a result of the introduction of the Bright Start program, reduction in the number of appeals to the DFA Review Board, enhanced monitoring and control of expenditure, improved governance and management of client case files, continued activities to advance financial assistance reform initiatives, and administrative maintenance of the Supplementary Unemployment Benefit Fund. Mr. Speaker, the report illustrates 5-year performance trend for the Department of Financial Assistance. It remains that the categories from the highest participants to the lowest remain pensioners, disabled, earner, low, and able-bodied unemployed year on year. For fiscal year 2021-22, the average number of recipients of financial assistance totaled 2,226, an increase from the average number of 2,184 recorded in the prior year. The recipient categories are 1,036 pensioners and seniors, 776 persons with disabilities, 210 persons with low earnings, and 204 able-bodied unemployed. The monthly average number of children that comprise the Child Daycare Allowance Program in 2021-2022 was 132, compared to 145 from the prior reporting period. The decrease was mainly attributed to the commencement of the Bright Star program commissioned by the Ministry of Education. Mr. Speaker, actual program expenditure for grants directly to support FA recipients totaled $47.6 million. The highest expenditures are rent, nursing homes, food, and insurance. Spending remained consistent with the prior fiscal year, while persons on assistance numbers increased. An increase in persons on assistance continued as a result of COVID-19, and the main categories impacted by the pandemic were able-bodied unemployed and low earnings persons. The average FA cost of able-bodied unemployed or earnings low persons is lower than the average FA cost of a pensioner or person with disabilities. Thus, an increased number of recipients does not necessarily equate to an increase in spending. Mr. Speaker, the Supplemental Unemployment Benefit Fund was introduced in September 2022 and extended in 2021. This funding was created to provide some assistance to Bermudians who continue to struggle with unemployment challenges as a direct result of the pandemic. With the implementation of this funding, the department was appointed to carry out a rigorous vetting process to minimize fraud and deter dishonesty. The Ministry of Finance was responsible for the issuance of payments after receipt of the recommended list from the Department of Financial Assistance. As of March 2022, 58 persons remain eligible for receipt of the Supplemental Unemployment Benefit. The total cost of the benefit from its exemption to March 2022 was approximately $2,541,000. Mr. Speaker, work continues in earnest to improve good governance by sustaining monthly compliance activities with specific focus on the use of data analytics to aid in compliance with financial instructions. The Financial Assistance Act and regulations and the Child Daycare Allowance Act and regulations. This allows the department to effectively demonstrate proficiency in consistently providing services that meet customer and regulatory requirements while demonstrating continuous improvement and minimizing risk. Mr. Speaker, during the period 2021-22, transactions monitoring was performed on 88,933 line transactions. The Department of Financial Assistance team continues to make strides on transforming service delivery so as to ensure the customer experiences professional and high-level conveyance of assistance. During the reporting period, the team participated in the Government of Bermuda Service Standards training to further improve their skills in this discipline. This has led to a decrease in the number of complaints lodged with the Ombudsman's Office and reduced the number of appeals referred to the Financial Assistance Advisory Board. Mr. Speaker, The report provides information that demonstrates ongoing work being performed to maintain fiscal responsibility by enhancing the monitoring of expenditures and reducing the risk of fraud. Stringent procedures are constantly being reviewed to ensure that the investigation officers utilize compliance guidelines in addition to the service of the Attorney General's chambers to standardize payment agreements in order to reduce receivables. Mr. Speaker, Phase 1 of financial assistance reform began in earnest during this period. Drafting instructions were completed and submitted in accordance with the legislative process. The Financial Assistance Amendment Act 2021 was passed in the House of Assembly in September 2021. Following consent of this act, it was realized that further changes were required, and to that end, it is intended that Phase 2 of the reform will address these changes. Additionally, future initiatives outlined in the 2022-2023 Durant speech will be incorporated in the next phase. Mr. Speaker, the ministry would like to take this opportunity to thank the Department of Financial Assistance team together with all other partners who collaborated to support the work that is being carried out. These efforts will ensure that Bermudians gain access to services that will assist them in maintaining a respectable standard of living. It is the goal of the ministry to go a step further to position Bermudians to achieve gainful and respectful employment opportunities. Initiatives will continue in earnest by utilizing services provided by the Department of Workforce Development to enable recipients to be better positioned for employment opportunities in the local workforce. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Haywood. The next minister's statement is the Bermuda Housing Corporation's 2022 housing update by the Honorable Colonel David Burris.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Mr. Speaker, articulated in both its 2017 and 2020 general election manifestos, this government vowed to ensure more affordable housing would be available for seniors and families, continue to increase the stock of affordable housing throughout the country, and expand rent geared to income programs. Mr. Speaker, I rise today for the purpose of providing proof that this government stands by its housing commitments through the Bermuda Housing Corporation. But before that, Mr. Speaker, I must provide some background to this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, you may recall the 2012 election platform of the One Bermuda Alliance, in which it was promised that they would, and I quote, support the expansion of affordable assisted living programs for our aging senior population and explore rent-to-buy options for younger people to get them on the housing ladder. So neither of these two promises were kept, thus leaving our huge demand for housing when we returned to government in 2017. Mr. Speaker, routinely, including prior to 2012, the BHC has had a waiting list of individuals and families seeking affordable housing or attempting to utilize other BHC programs that assist persons to purchase properties. However, Mr. Speaker, this is why this administration made the 2017 and 2020 election pledges, because the numbers produced were not enough to support Bermudians to fundamentally accomplish the reality of a rental unit or home ownership. Therefore, as mentioned, this government stands by its commitments, and through the Bermuda Housing Corporation, I'm pleased to share the following facts. One, Mr. Speaker, between 2018 and 2022, this government has supported the BHC in adding 48 new units that will be or are currently being utilized to either one, provide affordably priced housing to Bermudians through the rent geared to income-based scheme, which is capped at 35%, 25% rent, and 10% savings of their total household income, or two, provide affordable properties for first-time homeowners. Two, Mr. Speaker, between January and November this year, BHC added 18 additional rental units to their housing stock, and three, Mr. Speaker, between January and November this year, the BHC successfully housed an additional 42 families, bringing the total amount of families housed under the BHC to 578. But still, Mr. Speaker, that is not enough. 100-plus families on a waiting list, and many of them are fully employed, looking for affordability. This is why we have been pushing since 2017, even in these hard economic times, to be able to do something dramatic to address the problem. Mr. Speaker, I invite you and fellow honorable members to recall that on the 7th of October this year, I announced the Bermuda Housing Corporation Residential Rental Unit Renovation Program, which will see the refurbishment of 137 older housing units, inclusive of 77 additional new units, become available in the medium term at a cost of $21 million. These 77 units are the entire vacant and derelict inventory owned by the Housing Corporation. Another sign of the effects of a lack of funding, the inability to maintain the current housing stock. In addition to this program, the VHC will see an additional 18 rental units available for use by July 2023 through other ongoing programs such as the Economic Stimulus Program and the VHC Maintenance Program. Mr. Speaker, there is no denying that Bermuda has an extremely high cost of living, and this government is doing everything in our power to address this issue in the long term. But in the immediate, what we can do is to reduce the cost of housing for families. Now, this is not all the work the Housing Corporation undertakes. There are the rooming houses for men and women that are managed, the rental inspections carried out of the 578 owned units, the work at the Salvation Army complex, the various ongoing renovation and maintenance projects, the interaction with clients and potential clients. Mr. Speaker, we will not cease in our efforts to address the housing needs of Bermudians through the provision of affordable and appropriate housing initiatives. We will continue to devise creative ways to meet this commitment and will not stop until the problem is resolved. Mr. Speaker, I'm impressed with the commitment of all the players in this initiative, but particularly the determination of the board to provide proper and focused guidance to management. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to publicly thank the Bermuda Housing Corporation Board, ably led by our own MP, Christopher Famous, management and staff for the tremendous job they do to further deliver on the BHC mandate of providing affordable housing for Bermudians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Colonel. You have another statement, an update on the government's solar project?
Yes, I do, Mr. Speaker.
Continue.
I'm pleased to provide an update to this honorable House on the progress of the solar panel installation project of 4 government buildings. Mr. Speaker, in the government's 2017 election platform just over 5 years ago, this administration pledged to, and I quote, take the lead in investing in the green economy by outfitting government buildings with renewable energy generation technologies, enabling the government to become a net producer of energy. I can assure this House today, promises made, promises kept. Mr. Speaker, colleagues may recall in November 2020, I provided this honorable House with details of the rooftop solar PV systems installation project under the government's capital expenditure stimulus plan at a cost of $2,880,599. As a reminder, this project encompasses the installation of roof-mounted solar panels on 4 key government buildings: the General Post Office building, the government Colleagues may recall in November 2020, I provided this honorable House with details of the rooftop solar PV systems installation project under the government's capital expenditure stimulus plan at a cost of $2,880,599. As a reminder, this project encompasses the installation of roof-mounted solar panels on 4 key government buildings: the General Post Office building, the government It has produced 100 and 5,670 kilowatts of power, resulting in approximately $42,000 worth of saving in electricity costs. This places the system on target to effect annual savings of $100,800 per projections. Mr. Speaker, the overall project is on schedule and is set to be completed within the third quarter of 2023. And on budget thus far. But note that these issues may affect both timing and costs as we move forward. Mr. Speaker, building on the success of this project and in support of the government's strategy to utilize alternative energy, the Department of Public Lands and Buildings issued a request for proposal for the procurement of solar PV systems on an additional 30 government buildings on Friday, July 8th, 2022. The submission deadline for proposals was October 21st. The ministry received 10 responses. Currently, those responses are being evaluated in accordance with the Code of Practice for Project Management and Procurement. And Mr. Speaker, as always, I will keep this House informed of progress. As my honorable colleagues on this side of the aisle have consistently reiterated, this government delivers on its mandate as promised to the people of Bermuda in reducing the cost of government while also encouraging the use of alternative energy. High electric bills equates to a higher operating cost of running the government. Higher cost of government equates to higher taxes, and no one likes higher taxes. Mr. Speaker, as I have said before, this project was forecasted to reduce the overall cost of utilities, thus alleviating some of the burden on government financials while also endeavoring to reduce our global carbon footprint. This is proof of that achievement, and we will continue on this path to discover other means of reducing costs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, the Honorable Colonel David Birch. The next item, agenda items, reports on committees. There appear to be none. Now we have the Premier's questions. Let me just remind folks that the opposition leader can ask 3 questions and is permitted 2 follow-ups. All other members can ask 1 question and 2 supplementary questions. The Honorable Opposition Leader, Cole Headley Simons.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Premier, can you let the Honorable House know what new hotel development does the government have in its pipeline at this time? This new hotel development does the government have in its pipeline at this time?
Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question from the Honorable Opposition Leader. The answer to the question of which that I will give is that the only approved permit for new hotel development at this point in time, completely new hotel development, is the Aerial Sands project, which I'm sure the Honorable Member will be familiar with, that was received planning approval earlier this year.
Mr. Simons.
Supplemental.
Mm-hmm.
Can the Premier give an update on as to what's transpiring with the Abu Beach Hotel?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do not have the latest update for that. I know that the minister responsible for handling matters related to that. I do believe the Economic Development Committee is set to meet later this month, so I will get the most recent update, but I'm sorry I cannot provide an update for the Honorable Member, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition at this time on that particular project.
Thank you. Mr. Simons?
Thank you. My second question.
Second, okay.
Can the Premier confirm when the final agreement and documents will be executed in regards to the Fairmont Southampton Hotel?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Leader of the Opposition, we would know that this hotel project is something that is vital and important for Bermuda's future. The work continues to close on the hotel project. Nothing would have given me more pleasure, Mr. Speaker, than to come here today and to confirm the guarantee agreement and table it for the information of the Honorable House of Assembly. I do believe that the next time that we come back, that will happen. I know that the lenders have confirmed their funding and are just working through those particular documents. Those things are continuing to progress, but I cannot give the honorable member a specific date. What I can say is that the information that I have is that the developers are still confident that they will be able to progress the opening of the hotel for the 2024 tourism season, which of course is essential for Bermuda's tourism recovery. And so the documentation process is proceeding. It is a 5-party agreement. And as you can imagine, with a complex agreement with the funding now estimated to be north of $400 million in total investment when combined with the purchase of the hotel, with the redevelopment and the working capital, which is necessary in order to do that. Now, that cost, of course, has escalated due to global pricing increases, which, of course, add additional complexity. We would have been lovely, Mr. Speaker, if we would have been here and the hotel would have been under construction, but we understand the history and we understand the difficulty of coming to a revised agreement with the, I would say, the global challenges, economic challenges that happened after Russia's war with Ukraine. But the senior lenders have confirmed, the junior lenders have confirmed, and we're working through those particular process. The guarantee matters are all in place, and we're doing documentation, and the teams meet on a regular basis. I think the teams meet more than once a week.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Mr. Dunn,
Supplementary, Mr.
Supplementary.
Acting Speaker. Yes, good morning, colleagues, and good morning to people listening. To the Honorable Premier. The Honorable Premier just stated that it is the intention to open the hotel Fairmont Southampton in 2024, bearing in mind that we've just got a couple of weeks left in 2022.
Just get right to the question, Mr. Dunn.
Is how will it be possible to open the hotel in less than 18 months with all the work that's got to be done, planning, permission, then the actual work itself? How will it be possible?
Thank you, Mr. Dunkley. Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I am not a professional hotel developer. And I know that history will tell when the Honorable Leader of the Opposition had contracted with a non-professional hotel development, putting a $165 million guarantee down for the people of Bermuda. We saw what happened when that project was unable to be finished and ended up costing the taxpayers in excess of $200 million, and our inability to recover those funds because his government did not guarantee the entire portion of the project. That much being said, Mr. Speaker, we are working with teams who have developed hotels successfully throughout the world, and the information that they provided to us is that their construction timeline for this particular project is 14 months. I'm going to expect that they have done the work, the renovation work that needs to be done, the planning work that needs to be done, and that is the expectation. And so, yes, they are still confident that the hotel will be open in 2024. That is what the government is working towards, and we are doing everything to make sure with the parties that we get this agreement finalized, because nothing would give you more pleasure to make sure that this hotel breaks ground. And I'll happily invite the honorable member opposite to attend.
That's really nice. Mr. Simons.
Supplemental. With the financing in place, i.e. the mezzanine, the senior lending, and the local financing, can the Premier tell us what is causing the delay?
Mr. Speaker, the honorable member had a, I think, long and distinguished career in finance. And I think that the honorable member would know that at a point in time where there is surging global inflation, economic uncertainty, increasing in interest rates, these are things which are causing a challenge. Now, these are things that were not present last year this time in 2021. They are not. And following my resumption of the role of Ministry of Finance, we went back to this and we will recall what happened during last year, February. There was an invasion, there was a war, surging global inflation, massive spike in prices. All of these things have to be accounted for. What is important, Mr. Speaker, is that the deal that is completed is fully financed, rightly priced, protects the interests of the government of Bermuda, and ensures that we get a completed and open project. We have seen what happens when we attempt to rush these developments. Recent example is seen, and we'll debate it later today, when dealing with the Morgan's Point project, which was done by the party opposite. These things cannot be rushed, and we want to make sure, especially when we're looking at a government guarantee, that all of these items are in place. So the answer to the question in regards to the delay is that global market conditions are tough. That much being said, during global tough market conditions, the conditions of Bermuda's tourism economy, the fact that which Bermuda still remains an attractive place to invest, means that the senior lenders and the mezzanine lenders were comfortable in committing this funding despite the global economic uncertainty.
Thank you. Mr. Simons,
When,
you got a question or supplementary?
question,
That's your third question.
with the comments in regards to having the hotel up and running by 2024, can the Premier give us an estimation as to when the shovels will hit the ground?
Mr. Speaker, as I had answered the question earlier, I would be not able to give a precise timeline, but in order to meet the objective for this to take place and open the hotel in time for the 2024 tourism season, construction work would have to commence in the first quarter of 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Simons. Supplementary?
Supplementary,
Yes.
what other commitments does the government have to do to complete their role in ensuring that this project is closed on time and imminently?
Mr. Speaker, from the information that I have, the government has completed substantially its work in relation to the guarantee agreement between Clarion and GenCom. Of course, there's intercreditor agreements that have to go into place between the mezzanine lenders, the senior lenders that are involved in this. As I said, this is a very complex five-party transaction. I am not a real estate transaction lawyer, so I do not want to provide incorrect information to the honorable member, but it is my understanding that the government's legal team continues to work. As I said, there are regular project meetings, all hands calls which take place to ensure that we are progressing this documentation, but I do believe that all matters are in place. As I had indicated, I want to say when asked questions about this in September, I had said that there has been no change to the amount of the government guarantee and the provisions that we have negotiated have been fully documented and are waiting sign off from the intercreditor agreement with all of the parties involved. And again, this is a five-party transaction. So it's not as though if it's a contract between two people, it is a contract between five persons. That means all the people have to get around. It is a very complex project. But that's what happens, Mr. Speaker, when you have the largest tourism investment in the country's history.
Mr. Simons, you any further? Oh, Ms. Jackson?
Good morning, Deputy Speaker. Yes, just one question. I'm just curious whether the Premier can please provide the Honorable House with any update on the employees that were working at Southampton Princess and at the Fairmont Southampton and tracking their progress, especially given that we now are delayed an additional year.
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, one of the things that should be known is that our tourism industry did perform incredibly well this year, exceeded the expectations that we had set. And one of the things that the Minister of Economy and Labor would know, one of the things that you would know as well, Mr. Speaker, is that we continue to look for Bermudians who want to work in the hospitality industry because there is a shortage of Bermudians that are working in this industry. For persons who may have been working at the Fairmont Southampton, who have sought alternate employment, many of those persons have found alternate employment. And what I would encourage the honorable member, if there's anyone in her constituency who may be looking for employment and the hospitality sector, who may have worked at Fairmont Southampton, I'd encourage them to get in touch with the Department of Workforce Development. I know there is a hospitality job fair, I think, Minister. I think there's a hospitality job fair next year. The Minister of Economy and Labor and the Department of Workforce Development, in conjunction with Bermuda Tourism Authority and the Minister responsible for tourism, are continuing the work to encourage more and more Bermudians to enter that particular field, as there are opportunities that are there, and we're going to continue to train, but those opportunities are there. So I'd encourage the honorable member to speak to whomever is asking that question so they can get the correct information.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Any further? Mr. Simons? Okay, Mr. Famous, I see your name down.
Good morning, Bermuda. Good morning, Mr. Acting Speaker. Mr. Speaker, back in October, there was a gathering of persons up at,
We need the question. Can be opinion or argument, just a question.
Mr. Speaker, a few months ago, there was a mortgage guarantee unveilment. Can the Honorable Premier please provide the Honorable House with an update of this program, inclusive of how many persons may have applied for the mortgage guarantee program?
Thank you, Mr. Famous.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am thrilled with response from the mortgage guarantee program. It is something that we incredible response, and there are persons who are thrilled that they have been incredible response, and there are persons who are thrilled that they have been saving money for that 20% down payment, and all of a sudden now are at that threshold and are able to get a piece of the rock. So it is something that is working well. Incredible response, and there are persons who are thrilled that they have been saving money for that 20% down payment, and all of a sudden now are at that threshold and are able to get a piece of the rock. So it is something that is working well.
Mr. Famous, supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. How many supplementaries am I allowed?
Two.
Two. Okay.
Uh-huh.
What was the government?
What we are trying to achieve is to follow through on that goal. And with this, with reduced interest payments and with reduced down payment requirements, the ability to go ahead and to get on the housing ladder, what we wanted to achieve is to allow that opportunity reduce interest payments and with reduced down payment requirements, the ability to go ahead and to get on the housing ladder. What we wanted to achieve is to allow that opportunity for more young Bermudians to join that, join the ranks of homeowners.
No,
Mr. Speaker,
yes.
I want to know, the people want to know, who's going to benefit from this program?
Mr. Speaker, I think this is an important question. And you know why it's an important question? Because it's difficult sometimes when you get criticism, when you're trying to make sure that you do the best for this country. So while I'm out there some people are saying, oh, well, that's only going to benefit the wealthier. That's just going to benefit people with money. No, Mr. Speaker, that is not correct. There are hard-working Bermudians from across the social strata in this country who are struggling to get on the housing ladder. The first group of persons that are eligible are those persons who are 40 years and under, who are able to do it, but they're also able to combine with family members and other things to go ahead and support. So when we're looking to move people out of rented accommodations, rent geared to income, other places, going with housing corporation, dealing with matters which may be on the housing transition program, all those persons are people who we're looking to target with this program, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Perriman?
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Honorable Premier, your government has delayed the provision of casino licenses since you took power in 2017. Does the Honorable Premier know an actual date when a casino will finally be open in Bermuda?
Mr. Speaker, the honorable member should retract his question because the honorable learned member knows full well that the Bermuda Gaming Commission is independent when it comes to the awarding of casino licenses. So the fact that he says has delayed the awarding of licenses is patently false, and he should retract that question and correct it.
Mr. Premier, he's to ask a question, all you have to do is answer it. Mr. Perriman?
Thank you. The question was, does the Honorable Premier know an actual date when a casino will finally be open in Bermuda?
Mr. Speaker,
That's your second question, right? Or it's your supplementary?
It's the same one twice.
No, you can't.
It's a supplementary.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, I cannot answer that question because it is not under the purview of the government. And as the honorable member knows, that is a matter for the Bermuda Casino Gaming Commission. That is what we have. And the honorable member knows that interference from ministers inside of the operations of an independent authority such as that can cause damage to the country's reputation and delay it further.
You are correct, Mr. Premier. Mr. Perriman?
Second supplemental.
Yes.
If the Premier's answer just given to the House is correct, why is it that he previously promised this Honorable House that there would be casino open by 2001? 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can only go from the information that is relayed to me. When I met with those persons, they said that the work and the progress of which they're engaged in with the Bermuda Casino Gaming Commission, and it was their expectation that they would have a casino operating. I was asked a question from media, and I responded to that. We do not have operational control over the Bermuda Casino Gaming Commission. What we do have control over is the legislation that underpins that body. And if there's any legislative changes which may be needed in order to progress this, to speed up, to change, to make sure that we can get to the space we want, those matters will come to us from Bermuda Casino Gaming Commission, and the government will expediently put those into place. No one, Mr. Speaker, is more disappointed in the fact that we do not have this operating up and running than myself. It is a difficult thing, no question about it, but that is not going to stop us from working on it because, as the Honorable Minister for Economy and Labor has stated, casino gaming is one of the 4 priority matters that needs to be addressed. One of the things that I have spoken about in the statement which I gave earlier is the need to make sure that we deliver on these items. And I certainly want to assure the people of this country and the honorable member that any request for Bermuda Casino Game Commission that may be needed to ensure that we can have a speedier opening of hotels will be acted on expeditiously by the government.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes, so in the first instance, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I had a supplementary.
That's fine.
Can I ask that? And then I ask my other question?
But you only allow 1 question and 2 supplementaries.
So I better not supplementary back to the
You can ask,
mortgage program.
you can ask that as a supplementary you want to.
And then I can ask my question?
Well, you've had 1 question. You had your only question that you're going to ask.
Okay,
Yeah. You could ask supplementary. It don't have to be on your question, you know.
so my supplementary, going back to the 5-year mortgage program, just wondering whether the Premier might be able to shed some light on what will happen after the targeted time. I believe there's about 5 or 7 years. Will the interest rates and the repayment plans change after the set allotted time for the existing sort of benefited mortgage package has expired?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honorable member for a question because it is a great question. It's something that has come to us. It's something that has been asked here before, and I'm happy to continue to shed light on that. The information that I have, and is when asked that question, which has come, is that there is no intention to change the rates that are charged on that at the expiration of the government guarantee. But of course, that is subject to ensuring that the lender is in good stead with the bank. If they decide to not get in good stead, remember, the government is not involved in this. It's a private agreement between the lender and the bank, which is governed like any other mortgage would be. But the information which has come to me is that no, there will not be an increase when the loan to value drops under the space where the government guarantee is no longer required. But of course, that would mean that the person must maintain their payments on time, all those things in good standing with the bank in order to continue to enjoy those preferential rates.
Ms. Jackson?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Now I'd like to ask my question. And my question to the Premier is that I'd like to find out whether any parliamentarians or otherwise have any interest or financial or otherwise in the ResQuest, ResPartner, travel authorization software, anything to do with that. I'm just curious whether any parliamentarians were involved in that.
Thank you. Mr. Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honorable member for the ability to answer the question. And let me start by saying this, Mr. Speaker. I think that last week there was a reappointment of committees. There was a register of members' interests. And if there's financial interest that persons may have in those things, they shall be declared. However, as I have been subject to numerous rumors emanating and sometimes also coming from and being pushed by members opposite, talking about we need to know who's behind and who's benefiting from this, I can say categorically and without question that I have zero interest in ResQuest, ResPartner, anything else, and I have no knowledge of any other member of the legislature on my side that does. I cannot speak for members opposite, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Adams, you on the list? I'll take it next.
Mr. Speaker, of 20 mics in this house, I happen to be the only one with a broken mic. So one of two with a broken mic. So I do apologize for that. Mr. Speaker, many of my constituents are concerned
What's
with
your question, Mr. Adams?
Here we go.
Okay, we don't get right to the question. That's the rules.
I was going to ask the question
Okay,
was.
go ahead. I'm sorry. My apologies.
Not just a broken mic. Okay. Can the Honorable Premier please share and explain what the government is doing currently to address the increasing cost of inflation?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the rise in global inflation is certainly a challenge that is being borne by the citizens of this country. And it is incredibly difficult, certainly, for working class persons who spend the majority of their disposable income on the things which are subject to the highest inflation, such as food, energy in this country. Mr. Speaker, that is the reason why the government continues to work to provide economic relief, whether or not it is the reduction in payroll tax for those making under $96,000 and the announcement that's going out for consultation today for either further relief and the elimination of payroll taxes for persons making under $48,000. That's the reason why we have not increased government fees, so the government doesn't contribute to the increasing costs of living, and have also reduced them. That's the reason why, Mr. Speaker, that we have spent considerable money from the public funds in order to ensure that fuel prices at the pump have remained stable. And Bermuda is one of the few countries that do not say that we've had record gasoline prices during Russia's invasion, during the war in Ukraine. That is the reason why we launched a payroll tax rebate, so persons can apply to get money back from the Gulf of Bermuda, and depending on how much money is left in that program, we may be able to expand that even further to ensure that persons can get additional items. That is the reason why, Mr. Speaker, as you would know, as the chairman of the Cost of Living Commission, that we eliminated duty on 33 essential items and worked with the grocery stores in order to provide discounts on those particular items to do what we can to ease the burden of the cost of living for the people of this country.
Mr. Adams, supplementary.
Supplementary,
Again, let
yes,
me- 1 second, let me just apologize to you again. Continue.
No worries, no worries, it's fine. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Premier, how was the government able to provide such relief?
Mr. Speaker, the government has been able to provide that relief because this government keeps its promises. And this government did say in February, during the budget statement, that any better budget performance that was experienced above budget numbers, we would give half of that money back in relief to deal with the cost of living. And that is a result. The reason why we've been able to provide this additional relief, Mr. Speaker, is because of the sound economic performance of this government. Understand, Mr. Speaker, I had mentioned it earlier today, the projected net debt for the country at the end of this fiscal year in 3 months' time is now projected to be $115 million less than it was. Not too much to get excited about, Mr. Speaker, because we're still in a deficit position and we still have a significant amount of debt. But if you look at countries around the world who are challenged in recovering from the recession, recovering from the pandemic, the pace of Bermuda's recovery is exceeding even the targets that were laid out in the economic recovery plan and is showing that we are doing good work. And so from that aspect, we are returning those funds to the people of the country because of the strong rebound that we've experienced in Bermuda.
Thank you. Your final
Second supplementary, yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, can the Honorable Premier please advise the public on how persons can report issues with pricing of items specific to those who've received custom duty relief?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honorable member for his question because I think that it's important because at the same point in time, we are not going to say that they are not persons who are going to try to take advantage of increasing global inflation and pass on costs. And so what we have done is certainly made sure that there's more powers in the Cost of Living Commission. But what is also important, of which we've done, is that even during the pandemic, we had set up a space where members can report pricing issues that can be investigated. And all members have to go is to go to www.gov.bm, click on online services, where there is a myriad of online services that have been launched by this government since we've been in office, where people can go ahead, report price gouging, and it will be followed up and investigated.
Mr. Dunphy, you have a question and a supplementary left.
Thank you for your good guidance, Mr. Acting Speaker. The Honorable Premier, was there a penalty clause involved with ending the ResQuest contract early due to the TA closure?
Mr. Speaker, I do not have the specific details of that contract. I do believe that there is a question of which the honorable members asked. I'm happy to get him the specific matters in regards to whether or not there's a penalty clause or anything else on that particular matter. I don't want to provide him incorrect answers because it's not something that is specifically underneath my purview. That's with the Ministry of Health.
Mr. Dunphy.
Just a reminder, Mr. Acting Speaker, that that question was actually asked last week and another minister endeavored to provide the information. So perhaps the minister can turn around and get the information.
Okay, you can do your final supplementary? That's it?
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that was
Not during question period. We'll deal with it. Mr. Dunphy.
Mr. Speaker, that was not a question.
No, he made a statement and I've allowed it. It's fine. Mr. Dunkley.
Mr. Speaker, I'm asking you extended latitude to both sides of the House.
Mr. Hayward, do not try to lecture this chair. That's the last thing you want to do. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I do have a question, but as it entails numbers in regard to the last payment to ResQuest of $2 million, I will put that directly to the minister responsible because I believe the premier wouldn't have that information at hand.
Mr. Wade, you have your names down. You got 40 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can the Premier please provide this Honorable House with an update on how this government is addressing the issue of affordable housing in Bermuda?
Mr. Speaker, affordable housing is one of the most critical challenges, and this is resulted due to the strong performance and rebound of our economy and our international business sector. That is the reason why this government has given additional money to the Bermuda Housing Corporation over 3 years, over $22 million. That is the reason why we've launched the mortgage guarantee program, Mr. Speaker. That is the reason why we were advancing through the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation and the Economic Recovery Plan, approved residential schemes to ensure that we can provide more housing and assistance to the people of this country.
That's the end of the Premier's question period. Now we'll have the questions. Oh, let me see. Okay. Hope I got it right. The first question is to the Premier's questions. I'm going to hold that to later on. He's required more time. Oh, fine. Okay. And the first is from the opposition leader, Mr. Simons, on the economic update to the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm referring to the financial intelligence report update. And
Economic, which,
sorry,
the minister is saying, you're talking about the economic update statement?
Bermuda Fiscal Responsibility Panel, sorry. Bermuda Fiscal Responsibility Panel report. Mr. Speaker?
The question's on the ministerial statements, you know.
I am.
Yeah, but I'm looking for what you're talking about. Maybe I've got it wrong. Please
Second
guide me.
paragraph on economic and fiscal update, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, all right, so you're on economic update, okay.
I laid before the House Fiscal Responsibility Panel.
Continue.
Mr. Speaker, can the Premier speak to what is being done in regards to the debt to revenue ratio? And I'm asking because it remains close to 300%, whereas the benchmark is around 80%, and the Fiscal Responsibility Panel has raised this issue before. So I wonder if the Premier can shed some light on what's being done to remediate this position that we're in.
Premier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the answer that I can give to the honorable member is he would know, is well aware that these metrics have been set. They were set in 2015. The government has never met that metric, and certainly that would have been compounded during a once-in-a-century pandemic, but also that would have been compounded by the need of the government of Bermuda to borrow $200 million to finance the failed project that was given to us by the former government, Mr. Speaker. It is important that we remember that. So when we're talking about the debt to revenue ratio, that means that our revenue has to be higher than our debt. Our revenue right now is 1.1 billion, and our debt is 3 billion. That is out of whack. During their time in office, it was also out of whack. But how do we address that, Mr. Speaker? We address that by making sure the economy continues to grow, by making sure that we continue to enhance and enact the recommendations of the Tax Reform Commission, of making sure that we broaden the tax base and make the tax system more progressive, and that is to make sure that we get ourselves to a balanced budget faster, on time, to make sure that we can begin reducing the debt. We have laid out and set out those targets, and the commitment to those targets and the progress being made has been recognized by the Fiscal Responsibility Panel, and we are going to continue on that path, fiscal responsibility, because it is important for the future of this country.
Thank you. Mr. Simons, another question or supplemental?
Supplemental. So can the Premier, with his response, make a commitment that he will present a roadmap that will show some type of reduction in this ratio between the revenue and government debt within the next year?
Mr. Speaker, I don't have to wait until next year. The honorable member can refer to the budget statement that was given in this House, where it lays out the plan over the next 4 years to reach the budget target of $50 million. And there will be an update that is going to take place during this year's budget presentation. We will update those figures because things have changed since the last time the budget was presented. The last time there was a budget presented, Mr. Speaker, there was no war. The last time that the budget was presented, we did not have record global inflation for 40 years. So these are the challenges, but the government is well equipped to deal with those challenges. We've dealt with crises before, and we will deal with it again. So he will get his answer. He can look back at the budget statement to see where we are, and he can look forward to this budget statement. And I sincerely hope that we might even get an official submission from the opposition in response to this pre-budget report so they can let the people know where they stand, because this government is not afraid to let all the people of this country know where we stand on the side of working people.
Mr. Simons, is another question or supplementary?
Another question.
Continue.
Mr. Speaker, there was talk in regards to the report about the Tax Reform Commission and a review of our tax structure. Can the Premier provide an update of the reconstitution of the Tax Reform Commission?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honorable member for asking the question, because it is something that is important, because during the time of the budget statement, it was the anticipation that the Tax Reform Commission would have been reconstituted to work on additional recommendations. And the most critical item that the Tax Reform Commission was set to tackle was the matters related to the Global Minimum Tax Agreement. The matters related to the Global Minimum Tax Agreement, as I think I've shared in other places, but happy to share here, the structure of the Tax Reform Commission was that is done under law was deemed not able to handle the wide variety of input that would be required for the global minimum tax. When the Tax Reform Commission, the view is that there's a member from the opposition, there's a member from the government, there's a chair, a member from the trade unions, local business, international business, and some other person. And of course, when dealing with international business, Bermuda's international business base is very varied, whether or not you have traditional insurers, whether or not you have long-term insurers, whether you have international companies, whether or not you have, shipping, aviation, all those other types of matters that could be impacted. And so versus trying to referee, I would put it politely, on who would represent international business interests on the Tax Reform Commission, the government under Section 65 of the Constitution has set up an advisory body, which has been, where requests have gone out, responses have come back to make sure they commence the work on the Global Minimum Tax Agreement. And that has representation from ABIC, ABIR, built to the law firms, the accounting firms, the wide sectors of the industries which will be impacted by this. What is also important to note is that the government of Bermuda and the Ministry of Finance continues to engage in international business on this, whether it's with ABIC, ABIR, have regular meetings and updates on this particular matter. And we're going to have to progress it, because the global minimum tax will need something that will have to be put into place in legislation by the end of next year.
Mr. Simons, you have another question or supplementary?
Question.
Okay.
The report also showcases some deficiencies and concern about the future solvency of our government pensions. Can the Premier give an update on where we stand in regards to the recommendations presented by the McKinsey & Company in regards to helping address the concerns raised by the financial intelligence group? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank the honorable member for his question, because that is a very important issue. The issue related to the long-term sustainability of our pension funds is something that the Fiscal Responsibility Panel has made a point of, but also that we've made a point of. It is something that is essential. The measures of which were submitted have needed to be further reviewed. So there is going to be further review that is going to take place on those matters. And it's the aim, as stated inside of the throne speech, to bring those matters to consideration in this honorable chamber during this parliamentary session.
Thank you. And
But if I may continue, I would sincerely hope that the honorable member opposite, recognizing how important this is for the future sustainability of this country, will not play politics to this issue and will support the independent recommendations which would come into place. He's been very gracious in saying that he will look at what the social insurance reforms look like, and I'm happy to work with him and
Increase in revenue. Total revenue was projected to be $1.1 billion.
Mhm.
And the Premier indicated that increase in projection or actual performance increase in revenue. Total revenue was projected to be 1.1 billion.
Mhm.
And the Premier indicated that increase in projection or actual performance was a result of economic recovery. The last report indicated that part of the unexpected gain in revenue
I can state that inflationary taxes are not something that this government does want to continue to support. And that is the reason why we reduce and eliminated customs duties on essential goods. That's the reason why we have eliminated the customs duty to make sure that, or made it flexible to make sure that fuel prices remain constant. And if the honorable member wishes to be directed, I'm happy for him to look at page 13 of the pre-budget report of where it lays out the original estimates and the revised estimates. And he will note that the customs duty estimate remains unchanged from the original estimate made in the budget up until now. And that is quite likely because, Mr. Speaker, we have given significant relief on the levels of customs duty because this member is asked during question time, what is the government doing to help and aid with the cost of living? And the one thing that we can do is control the things that we have, and that is taxes, and that is what we've done. So, Mr. Speaker, there is no change, and none of that increase is from additional customs duty revenue. We are giving money back to taxpayers and providing relief where we can.
Mr. Simons?
My supplemental question, this is my last one.
Mhm.
On page 7 of his statement, he speaks to, and I read, the proposal for changes to employee payroll taxes include changes to rates to reduce payroll tax. For the first 48,000, they'll be exempt from payroll tax. And my question is this: if an employee has 2 jobs and each of the jobs, let's say, pay him $45,000, will he be taxed on the cumulative amount of the 2 jobs, or will he be exempt, given that both of the jobs pay less than $48,000?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honorable member for his question because it's an excellent question. It's
Yes.
something that we grapple with. Bermuda does not have an income tax system. If Bermuda had an income tax system, the situation of which he's speaking about would be caught inside of an income tax system. We do not have an income tax system. We have a payroll tax system, which functions as an income tax on labor income, but is only collected by each individual employer. The answer to the honorable member's question is no, that person would not be subject. But I think it's important, Mr. Speaker, to note and to understand, because though it would be strange, I think, for one person to have 2 jobs that pay $45,000 a year, it would not be strange to have someone working for one job, which is their main job, possibly in the government of Bermuda or somewhere else, and additional jobs to attempt to make up some funds. And the perspective which we take, Mr. Speaker, is that no, that person who is struggling to make ends meet, who is working, who is doing that extra job, who is trying to save up that 10% down payment to take advantage of items, will be able to get that tax relief. So I appreciate the member for asking the question. It is something that we grapple with, but the answer is no, that person would not be.
Mr. Dunkley? Oh, you said it, but you got a number, you said it was your last.
In regards to the dividends for local companies, can the
Excuse me, I
Premier,
just need some clarification. You're on which, you've had 3 questions.
supplemental,
Yes, yes.
supplemental,
You're on your
on
second.
revenue, yes. Yes. The Premier indicated that there'll be possible taxes on dividends from local companies. Can he confirm whether or not the local companies include exempt companies? because as someone who was in the business, a number of people hold local companies and foreign companies in investment holding companies. And the dividends to be rolled up in the investment holding company and not actually paid to the shareholder. And as a consequence, the company strengthens and enjoys the benefits. So how do they attend to address those type scenarios?
Mr. Speaker, the matter of which he's speaking about is the recommendation from the 2018 Tax Reform Commission, which speaks to withholding tax, interest, dividend, and a flat tax on the value of dividends and interest. These are the matters that are going out for consultation. And if the honorable member does have any views and thoughts on that, I welcome to receive the official submission from him as the Shadow Minister of Finance so that we can go ahead and address those issues. But the full matters have been spelled out in the Tax Reform Commission report. The pre-budget report does contain a link to that report in case persons want to read. I'm sure there is very detailed analysis that is there on those matters. And I'm happy if the honorable leader of the opposition, Shadow Minister of Finance, wants to add any input on that as we formulate what taxes may be, because understand, Mr. Speaker, key point, these are matters for consultation. This does not mean that in February, all of these matters will end up being inside of the budget. There is a wide range of matters that we put out to consultation because it's important. And I remember the last time I did this, there were matters which went out to consultation, and because of the feedback, we actually adjusted our plans to make sure that things work better. And so I encourage all persons, including members opposite, to take the consultation process seriously, make sure to go ahead and respond. Not everything that is mentioned in this document will end up in the budget because there are some things that might be, the combination of all the taxes and things might be more than the actual needs of which the government may have for next year. And so from that perspective, I think that it's important that members do, take the consultation process seriously. And I'm happy to meet with the Shadow Minister for any particular questions or invite him to the Ministry of Finance to answer the questions that he or members of the team may have.
Mr. Dunkley? Mr. Perriman, did you have your? Okay. So that's any further? Nobody else got the name down, but okay. The next one is the Minister of National Security, and Mr. Dunkley has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Acting Speaker. To the Honorable Minister of National Security, in regard to your statement on police recruitment, in light of the shortage, what is the current manpower level of the Bermuda Police Service?
Mr. Speaker, currently the manpower level in the Bermuda Police Service is 376.
Mr. Dunkley?
Supplementary, Mr.
Supplementary,
Speaker.
yeah.
What is the Bermuda Police Service request for adequate manpower level?
The police in this fiscal year, their number for adequate manpower would be 420.
Mr. Dunkley?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. So in light of the funding of 20 additional officers, we're still 24 short. How will government address that shortage?
Mr. Speaker, we are not in charge of operation policing, but I can answer that question. As we speak, there is a recruit class going on in the Bermuda Police Service.
Mr. Dunkley, is second question?
Second question, Mr. Speaker. The recruit class that is taking place, is that to attract the 20 officers that the minister refers to in this statement?
No, Mr. Speaker, that recruit class is for local recruits, new police officers.
Mr. Dunkley?
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. So
Yes.
For clarity, Mr. Speaker, the Bermuda Police Service is actually locally recruiting 20 officers and overseas recruiting 20 officers.
Minister?
No, Mr. Speaker. We don't know how much recruits the local, the police would get locally.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
So the funding that the honorable minister refers to in this budget of $499,000 this fiscal year and 1.4 million next year, what recruit class does that refer to?
Mr. Speaker, I think I made it clear in my statement that it's for 5 community police officers we would get locally and 15 overseas specialist officers. And while I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker, the recruit class that's going on right now locally is for new police officers. Overseas, what we're looking for overseas are specialized police officers.
Another question, Mr. Dunkley? You got another question?
Yes, another question, Mr. Speaker. So in light of the minister's admission of the numbers of the Bermuda Police Service being 44 short, is government committing to funding that number in the next financial year?
Minister?
The budget is still being discussed, Mr. Speaker, so no final numbers or agreements have been made.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
A supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, in an organization as big as the Bermuda Police Service with roughly 400 members, what compensation is made for general attrition?
Mr. Speaker, this coming from a former Minister of National Security, and that's really not what I do, but police officers come and go, they retire, they resign, and the like. So that's the best I could do.
Yeah, Mr. Dunkley, it's not addressed in his statement. So I think it's kind of unfair to expect the minister to have that particular event that's not addressed in the statement.
Mr. Speaker, I will take your advice because we can't get back and forth. The only thing I can do is ask a question.
Yes, no, we understood.
So I'll ask a supplementary question. The honorable minister states on the second page that 300,000 was put towards the budget for vehicles and just over $1 million to the CCTV. Can the honorable minister give an update on if the 300,000 has been spent year to date on the vehicles and an update on how much has been spent on the CCTV system?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the paper, the $300,000 was allocated for vehicles, and the police are in process of getting those vehicles on island. As it concerns the CCTV, an RFP went out, and it's currently being reviewed for those that have applied to upgrade our CCTV.
I think, was it your second or your first supplement? Ms. Wolf, is that his second? That was the second supplementary on that question? Okay, Dunkley, you'll finish. I'll say, there are no further, nobody put the name down to ask questions on that. The next question is to the Honorable Minister, Jason Hayward from Mr. Pearman.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Honorable Minister Hayward, my question is about your statement headed Update on the Economic Recovery Plan. At page 2 of your statement, where you deal with theme 4, expanding resident population, you state that you've had 71 new individuals under the EIC, the Economic Investment Certificate, and 188 applications for either PRC or status. Given your statement that you wanted to see a growth of some 8,000 people in Bermuda, where is the government's comprehensive immigration reform plan?
Mr. Hayward?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, as indicated in this House, the first step of the government strategy was to put out the age and population report. The aging population report sets out what the issue is. The second thing was to get an adequate measure that we can use to determine what is the workforce required for our economy to be sustainable. We've determined to use the old age dependency ratio, and we've got a benchmark figure. I've indicated on several occasions that the next step is to put an implementation plan in place, and I have an aim to have that implementation plan completed by the end of the first quarter of 2023. I will do full round of consultation so that all community stakeholders have an opportunity to discuss immigration, business growth, and labor policy.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Pearman?
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. No supplementals. My second question.
Uh-huh.
Honorable Minister, at page 3 of your statement, when dealing with theme 7, which is the penultimate paragraph, regulatory framework, you skipped the middle sentence of that paragraph where it says the first proponent, sea-based, is exploring the development of a wave power park. Was that skipped intentionally, or did you just omit that when reading your statement?
It was neither skipped intentionally or omitted. That is not the feature of, that sentence is not a feature of my statement. And so that statement has been corrected in the statements that were distributed to members of parliament.
Supplementary?
Continue. Go ahead.
Thank you. Are we to conclude from that in fact, sea-based is no longer exploring the development of a wave power park?
Mr. Speaker, the member cannot ask a question to something that is not a feature of the statement.
Yeah, remember, the corrected statement was sent out. You probably got the old one.
I mean, with respect, Mr. Acting Speaker, I'll take your guidance, but if a statement is given to the House and it's in there, I can ask about it. I'm not sure why he doesn't want to answer the question either.
No. The report that, Mr. Pearman, please report a comment. The minister, one thing about this minister, he answers all questions, right? Don't go there.
I'll be guided by you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
It should be on your tablet. You don't have your tablet with you?
I have the statements from this morning.
No, I understand that. That was
I can
corrected.
move on, Mr. Acting
Okay.
Speaker. There are other questions and
All
other
right.
things to deal with.
Please.
Thank you. Also at page 3 of 4, you deal with the issue of healthcare. And you suggest that universal health coverage is advancing with priority projects. You then list 5 priority projects. It's right, isn't it, that none of those projects actually advance universal health coverage?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Minister of Health has indicated a roadmap to universal health coverage. Those are key features of that particular roadmap, and they will advance us in getting to the position that the government desires.
Mr. Pearman?
Thank you. Supplementary.
Supplementary.
One of those projects is to agree our starting points. Wouldn't that be a necessary first step of any project?
Yes, if we fail to plan, we correct. And so a key portion of any project will be ensuring that we have an adequate plan in place.
Mr. Pearman, scheduled 12:30, it's there. I don't know if you want to finish. I've got 30 more minutes on that. My fault.
We have another 30 minutes after lunch, I believe.
Yes, you do.
So I'll pause now if you wish me to.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't put it to the 60, but I'm aware of that.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move that we adjourn until 2 p.m.
We are adjourning for lunch and we'll return at 2 o'clock and we have 30 minutes left.
Mr. Acting Speaker, sorry, if I could just correct what I said. It's not necessarily 30 minutes. It's the period of 1 hour total. Of
No,
course.
I know what I'm
I didn't want
saying. No,
Thank you.
please, I know what I'm saying. It's 30 minutes left. If you finish before, then it's finished. But it's 30 minutes left in the question period.